Silence is golden, HOA Karen Mildred McMillan declared, her voice echoing across the otherwise unnervingly quiet cul-de-sac of Willowbrook Estates. She wasn't addressing anyone in particular, just projecting her pronouncement of suburban sonic purity into the afternoon air, as if Willowbrook Estates itself was a sentient being in need of constant noise level correction. And in Willowbrook Estates, correction always meant HOA Karen's way. Golden, she repeated, nodding sagely to herself, adjusting her perfectly symmetrical sunglasses as if confirming the profound wisdom of her own statement. And barking. Barking is most definitely not golden. Barking is bronze at best, perhaps even tin. She shuddered dramatically, as if the mere thought of bronze or tin-level noise polluting the pristine soundscape of Willowbrook Estates was physically painful. I suppressed a sigh, tightening my grip on my dog Barnaby's leash. Barnaby, a golden retriever with the soul of a gentle giant and the occasional vocal enthusiasm of a slightly over-caffeinated opera singer, merely wagged his tail, oblivious to the sonic judgment being cast upon his very species by the self-appointed sound warden of Willowbrook Estates. We were on our daily, silent stroll, a carefully orchestrated pantomime of dog walking designed to minimize any and all potential bronze or tin level noise infractions that might attract HOA Karen's unwelcome attention. Willowbrook Estates, under HOA Karen's iron-fisted and remarkably noise-sensitive rule, had become a suburban sound vacuum. Birds chirped at a respectful volume, children were encouraged to play, quietly, and any dog who dared to bark above a polite, almost apologetic woof risked incurring the wrath of HOA Karen and her ever-expanding pet noise ordinance. The ordinance, a masterpiece of suburban overregulation, was HOA Karen's magnum opus, her sonic symphony of suburban control. It detailed, in excruciatingly specific detail, acceptable decibel levels for pet vocalizations at all hours of the day and night. It included a barking frequency chart, a whining permissibility matrix, and a meow volume index, all meticulously crafted and aggressively enforced by HOA Karen and her self-deputized noise patrol, consisting primarily of herself, armed with a decibel meter app on her phone, and an endless supply of passive-aggressive violation notices. Barnaby, bless his innocent bark-loving heart, had become HOA Karen's public enemy number one. His occasional bursts of canine enthusiasm, a joyful bark at a passing squirrel, a friendly woof at a fellow canine pedestrian, even a contented sigh that might, in HOA Karen's hypersensitive ears, register as excessive canine respiration, were met with immediate and increasingly hostile HOA Karen interventions. Emails, violation notices, even direct decibel meter wielding confrontations on the sidewalk, HOA Karen was determined to silence Barnaby and, by extension, silence all joy, all spontaneity, all bronze or tin level noise from Willowbrook Estates. Remember, Miss Jenkins, HOA Karen continued, her voice sharp, her gaze fixed on Barnaby with the intensity of a hawk eyeing a particularly noisy field mouse. Rule 57, subsection R. Paragraph 12 is very clear. Excessive and unnecessary pet vocalizations are strictly prohibited. Unnecessary, Miss Jenkins. Unnecessary is the key word here. Is that squirrel truly necessary to bark at, Miss Jenkins? Is it? I gritted my teeth, resisting the urge to point out that HOA Karen's constant, noise-obsessed pronouncements were, in themselves, a significant source of unnecessary human vocalizations in Willowbrook Estates. Instead, I simply offered a tight, strained smile and tugged Barnaby's leash, pulling him into a silent, noise-compliant retreat, away from HOA Karen and her golden ideal of suburban silence. But as we walked away, Barnaby, bless his rebellious soul, let out a soft, almost defiant little woof, a tiny bronze-level woof of canine protest. And in Willowbrook Estates, under HOA Karen's rule, even a tiny woof could be considered an act of suburban sonic rebellion. And rebellion in Willowbrook Estates was about to get vocal. Life in Willowbrook Estates, under HOA Karen's increasingly draconian pet noise ordinance, became a hushed, tense, and frankly rather miserable affair. Dog walks were no longer joyful strolls, but anxiety-ridden tiptoeing exercises in noise suppression. Backyard barbecues were conducted in near silence, lest a burst of laughter or a clinking glass be deemed a noise violation. Even the birds seemed to chirp more quietly, intimidated into sonic submission by the ever-present threat of HOA Karen's noise patrols. The neighborhood's pets, however, were less easily silenced. Dogs, being dogs, occasionally barked. Cats, being cats, occasionally meowed. An HOA Karen, being HOA Karen, reacted with swift and merciless rulebook fury. Violation notices rained down like confetti at a beige-themed parade. Fines mounted. Neighborhood email threads exploded with increasingly frantic pleas for pet noise compliance from HOA Karen and increasingly exasperated protests from everyone else. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate amongst the pet-owning residents of Willowbrook Estates. "Something has to be done about HOA Karen," Mrs. Rodriguez muttered darkly, as we commiserated over our latest excessive canine respiration violation notices. Barnaby had apparently sighed too loudly while napping on the porch. Decibel meter readings were naturally included as evidence. "This is loco. We live in a neighborhood, not a library. Dogs bark. It's what they do." Old Mr. Henderson, usually a mild-mannered and rule-abiding resident, surprised us all by suggesting something slightly radical. "We should bark back," he declared, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint I'd never seen before. "Not literally, of course, but figuratively. We need to make noise about this noise ordinance. Show HOA Karen that we won't be silenced." The idea, initially vague and slightly absurd, started to take shape, fueled by shared frustration and a growing sense of collective canine injustice. We talked, we brainstormed, we whispered conspiratorially over fences and during hushed dog walks, and slowly, organically, the idea of a bark-back choir began to emerge. Not a literal choir of barking dogs, though the image was undeniably appealing, but something more surreal, more unexpected, something that would challenge HOA Karen's noise tyranny in a way she couldn't possibly comprehend, let alone control. The plan, still hazy and more of a feeling than a concrete strategy, involved the pets themselves. Somehow, we would activate the dogs, unleash their collective canine voice, not in angry protest, but in a more artistic manner. A sonic rebellion, orchestrated by the very creatures HOA Karen sought to silence. It sounded crazy. It sounded impossible. It sounded perfectly Willowbrook Estates absurd. And it sounded, just maybe, like the only way to break free from HOA Karen's golden silence and unleash a little bit of bronze-level canine chaos. The whispers of rebellion were growing louder. The seeds of the bark-back choir were sown, and Willowbrook Estates, once a sound vacuum, was about to become a surreal symphony of barks. The first stirrings of the bark-back choir were accidental, almost imperceptible, more a feeling in the air than an actual sound. It started subtly, during HOA Karen's daily noise patrol walks. As she strode down the street, decibel meter app at the ready, a few dogs, seemingly spontaneously, would let out a small, hesitant woof. Nothing aggressive, nothing particularly loud, just a single, questioning bark, quickly silenced by their equally anxious owners, terrified of attracting HOA Karen's attention. But the woofs persisted, and they started to synchronize. As HOA Karen passed a house, a dog would bark. Then, as she moved on, another dog further down the street would chime in with a woof of its own. It was disjointed, hesitant, more of a scattered series of canine coughs than a choir. But it was something unusual. Something that made the pet owners of Willowbrook Estates exchange knowing glances and suppressed smiles during their increasingly tense dog walks. HOA Karen, initially oblivious, soon started to notice. Her perfectly symmetrical eyebrows furrowed. Her pace quickened. She started glancing nervously around, her decibel meter app flickering wildly, registering something, but not quite a sustained noise violation. Just woofs. Random woofs. Unexplained woofs. Suburban woof anomalies. The woofs became more frequent, more coordinated, more intentional sounding. It was as if the dogs of Willowbrook Estates were learning to bark together, practicing, rehearsing for some kind of canine concert, conducted by an unseen, unheard, but undeniably present force. And that force, everyone in Willowbrook Estates secretly suspected, was rebellion. Pet-powered, subtly sonic, and utterly surreal rebellion. The dogs themselves seemed confused, yet strangely energized by this new spontaneous barking phenomenon. Barnaby, usually a polite and relatively quiet canine citizen, started joining in the woofing chorus, his gentle barks adding a surprisingly melodic bass note to the emerging canine symphony. He would tilt his head, listening intently to the woofs echoing down the street, then add his own contribution, a soft, questioning woof, as if asking, Is this what we're doing now? Are we barking back?" The pet owners, initially anxious, started to relax, to even encourage the woofs. A subtle nod to their dogs as HOA Karen passed, a barely perceptible loosening of the leash, a silent permission to vocalize. It was a risky game, a delicate dance on the edge of HOA Karen's wrath. But the thrill of sonic rebellion, the shared sense of canine conspiracy, was intoxicating. Willowbrook Estates, once a sound vacuum, was starting to hum, a low, rumbling, woof-infused hum of canine dissent. And HOA Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of silence, was about to discover that silence sometimes is not so golden after all, especially when faced with a neighborhood full of dogs who were just starting to find their collective voice. The climax of the Barkback Choir's sonic rebellion arrived, as all good climaxes should, with a perfectly timed, utterly surreal, and hilariously public performance. It was the annual Willowbrook Estates Neighborhood Harmony Picnic. The irony was, at this point, almost unbearable. Meticulously planned and aggressively promoted by HOA Karen, naturally. A celebration of community tranquility, she called it. A sonic showcase of suburban serenity. A picnic, in other words, designed to further solidify her reign of noise-free terror. The picnic was in full swing. Beige blankets were spread out on the perfectly manicured community lawn. Beige-clad residents mingled in hushed tones, sipping decaffeinated beverages and nibbling on noise-compliant snacks. Crunchy chips were strictly forbidden, excessive auditory disturbance, naturally. The atmosphere was stiflingly serene, unnervingly quiet, almost waiting for something to disrupt the oppressive silence. And then, the Barkback Choir began to sing. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves of the HOA-approved naturally trees, a low rumbling woof from a dog on the far side of the picnic area, a single isolated bark, easily dismissed as a random canine utterance. But then another woof joined in, then another, then another. Woofs echoing from all corners of the picnic area, seemingly spontaneously erupting from the otherwise silent suburban landscape. The woofs grew louder, more coordinated, more intentional. It was no longer random barking. It was a chorus, a canine chorus, a symphony of woofs, yips, howls, and woos, rising in volume and intensity, swirling around the picnic area, enveloping the beige-clad residents in a wave of unexpected, utterly surreal, and undeniably vocal protest. Dogs, previously leashed and muzzled into near silence, were now standing tall, heads held high, chests puffed out, barking with newfound confidence and collective canine purpose. Small dogs yipped soprano notes, large dogs boomed bass lines, terriers added staccato yaps, and hounds contributed soulful howls. It was a chaotic, beautiful, utterly absurd symphony of canine dissent, orchestrated by the invisible hand of suburban rebellion, conducted by the collective canine soul of Willowbrook Estates. HOA Karen, Mildred McMillan, the self-proclaimed maestro of suburban silence, stood frozen in the center of the picnic area, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. Her perfectly symmetrical sunglasses slipped down her nose, her jaw dropped open, her carefully constructed facade of noise-free control shattered. She looked around wildly, searching for the source of this sonic uprising, her eyes darting from dog to dog, from owner to owner, desperately trying to regain control of the now utterly chaotic soundscape of her neighborhood harmony picnic. But there was no controlling the Barkback Choir. It was a force of nature, a spontaneous eruption of canine vocalization, a surreal symphony of suburban dissent. The dogs were barking back, loudly, collectively, and there was absolutely nothing HOA Karen Mildred McMillan could do to silence them. The picnic, intended to be a celebration of her noise-free tyranny, had become a public performance of pet-powered rebellion, and the Barkback Choir, in full voice, was just getting started. The Barkback Choir's performance at the Neighborhood Harmony Picnic became legendary in Willowbrook Estates lore. The picnic, predictably, dissolved into utter chaos, beige blankets abandoned, noise-compliant snacks forgotten, as residents, initially bewildered, then amused, then increasingly emboldened by the surreal canine uprising, erupted into laughter and applause, joining the dogs in their sonic rebellion, clapping, cheering, even woofing along with the Barkback Choir. HOA Karen, Mildred McMillan, the Queen of Silence, the self-appointed sound warden of Willowbrook Estates, was utterly, completely, and hilariously defeated. She retreated from the picnic area, her perfectly symmetrical sunglasses askew, her power suit rumpled, her face a mask of incandescent rage and utter unadulterated public humiliation. She vanished into her house, slamming the door behind her, the sound of the Barkback Choir echoing in her ears, a constant, surreal, and utterly inescapable reminder of her sonic downfall. And the Barkback Choir? It didn't stop. It became a permanent, wonderfully unpredictable feature of Willowbrook Estates' life. Whenever HOA Karen Mildred McMillan dared to venture outside her house, the dogs of Willowbrook Estates would spontaneously erupt into their surreal symphony of woofs, yips, howls, and woos, a constant canine serenade of suburban descent. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't threatening, it was just there. A sonic reminder of the day the pets of Willowbrook Estates found their collective voice and barked back against noise tyranny. HOA Karen, predictably, became a recluse, rarely venturing out, her reign of sonic terror officially, gloriously, and utterly silenced. The Willowbrook Estates HOA, now under the blissfully noise-tolerant leadership of Brenda McMillan, who, bless her dog-loving soul, secretly recorded the Barkback Choir performance and made it her ringtone, quietly revised the pet noise ordinance, replacing the decibel charts and whining permissibility matrix with a single elegantly simple sentence. Willowbrook Estates celebrates the joyful sounds of happy pets. As for Willowbrook Estates, it became louder, not chaotic or unruly, but alive. Dog walks were joyful again, filled with happy barks and wagging tails. Backyard barbecues echoed with laughter and clinking glasses, no longer conducted in hushed, noise-compliant tones. And the Barkback Choir, though still a surreal and unpredictable phenomenon, became a source of community amusement, a reminder of the day the pets of Willowbrook Estates found their voice and barked back against silence. And every time I heard the faint, surreal strains of the Barkback Choir echoing through Willowbrook Estates, a spontaneous symphony of woofs and yips and howls, I couldn't help but smile. HOA Karen's reign of sonic terror was over. Suburban sanity and a little bit of glorious pet-powered surrealism had been restored, and Willowbrook Estates finally was filled with the sound of happy dogs, barking back, in perfect, if slightly chaotic, harmony. And that, I thought, was a truly golden ending. A surreal, satisfying, and perfectly wooftastic symphony of suburban justice.